get everyone to please close their eyes? So, right now, I ask you to close your eyes and take a deep breath. Feel your feet on the ground. And listen, I'm going to be telling you a story, and I want you to imagine it's you. I want you to imagine you're 12 years old. Back in the day, there was a time when it was literally raining rockets. I was younger, and I went out on the street to the market to buy something. And then suddenly, a rocket fell. It fell close to my house and close to the rocket. I was so scared. I freaked out. I immediately started crying, and I ran back home. My grandma left searching to pick me up and calm me down, and I can never forget that awful sound. Our town became super insecure, and kidnapping started to happen. My grandma would never let me out late and would always tell me to come home after specific hours. You may now open your eyes. This is my friend Yara. I met her at an international youth camp called Global Encounters. And this is a camp where I met Ismaili youth from all over the world. But they all shared their personal stories, but Yara's story in particularly was very compelling. I found it very unbelievable that someone just like us, someone sitting here, could be going through something so terrible and so terrifying that it made me tremble when she told me that story. Hearing Yara's story truly taught me to empathize with Syrian youth, and it created a personal connect for me. Quoted by His Highness the Aga Khan, encounters have complexity and dimensionality. I believe that to understand our encounters with each other, we need to empathize with each other and understand that it not only impacts them, but it impacts us on a wider scale. Honestly speaking, if I hadn't gone to this camp, I don't think that I would care about this issue as much as I do. Now I am passionate about the situations of refugees worldwide, and I believe that their situation was solely out of their control. I believe that we need to talk about this more, and I'm always wondering to myself why I never hear about this in the medias. I don't truly understand why we're always talking about climate change, the coronavirus, the Australian fires, and don't even get me started on the endless conversations about Trump, when in reality there's youth around the world who are genuinely suffering and that there's nothing that we can really do about it. It's not that I don't care about the other issues, but I'm saying, why are we ignoring youth who are in these unfortunate situations that are solely out of their control? I believe that my encounter with Yara wasn't an awakening. It was a call to action to me personally, or at the very least, a call for me to educate myself and my community around me. Some of the stories I've heard from my Syrian friends was that Syria is a beautiful place that is very stunning and really beautiful to live in. However, this was at odds with my view of Syria, which was that. I realized that we should imagine Syria as a spectrum. On one hand, the war does not affect the youth and their families, and they're totally safe. And on the other hand, they're in war zones, and if you leave your house, there's a high probability of being kidnapped, killed, or bombed by the extremist groups. The situation is not black and white. 6.7 million Syrians are refugees, and 6.1 are being internally displaced. Women and children are especially affected, and half of that number I said, so 3 million, are affected by children. Women and children are affected to a wide range. So some of the things that they're affected by are sexual violence, early marriage, child labor, and physical and mental trauma. Because of this crisis, Syrians nearly make up 1/3 of refugees worldwide. Let that sink in. 1/3 of refugees worldwide. And this leaves them with bombed infrastructure, lack of basic needs, and schools. We've all heard that saying, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Well, I'd hate to tell it to you, but this isn't the first time something like this happened in Syria. In the 1300s, Nizari Ismailis found themselves displaced, and they needed to find a new home in which were very hostile situations. They were surrounded by the Abbasids, Crusaders, Mongols, and other groups. In the middle of a power struggle, some went to Syria and established safe havens and fortresses, and not just Ismailis, but anyone facing persecution could not find refuge. So, is there a way that we can learn from our history and respond to our circumstances that we face today? Well, so the leaders of the Nizari Ismaili community focused on safety and basic needs first. And then they built support systems such as education that ended up attracting the best of their minds at that time. Despite their circumstance that they were living in, either in the Middle Ages or today, we're all humans and we all have basic needs that we need. These are the steps that keep people resilient and give them hope, but do we only focus on the external needs? Nizari Ismailis suffered through adversities during the Mongol invasions, and entire populations were massacred. They witnessed extreme atrocities. All this time, they looked for their leaders for guidance and support. They looked for each other for hope and compassion. They needed this to survive their brutal reality. Much like the story I told you at the beginning, many of my Syrian friends, in fact, all of them that I've talked to, have told me stories about abuse and kidnapping and the results that followed them. In their attempt to escape violence, they go on a long, crazy journey, and they always end up in a new country as refugees. And even though their new country may be safe, this isn't the end to their journey. They always endure post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression, because imagine leaving your house. Like, how would you feel? Child psychiatrist Essam Daoud stated that we need to acknowledge that first aid is not needed for the body, but it has to include the mind and the soul. Young kids often endure these traumas for the rest of their lives, which inhibit their self-growth. We can prevent this by something called the golden hour. This is when we can reframe an experience for a child from victimhood to resiliency. And instead of feeling scared, we focus on how brave they are and how they've become so strong. And this can help them become more resilient. This is a new coping mechanism that helps them with their emotional and mental traumas. But now I'm going to address the real question. Why should you care? Why should you care, you sitting here today, after hearing all these facts, why should you care? There's no real reason. And quite frankly, it's human. Not all of you can empathize because, one, you have no personal connection, and two, you have so much on your mind that this is just one more thing to add to the list. In my opinion, I don't believe that's a reason for you not to care, or at least not to make a difference. I've become more empathetic, and I've built my own personal character by helping or by even supporting Syrians. And quite frankly, I've become more compassionate about the world around me. But the main reason for me is that I've noticed how fortunate I am to be living in such a resourceful country such as Canada. However, I think you should care for the sole reason that youth, exactly like us, are being killed, kidnapped, and bombed on a daily basis. Think to yourself, if you were in their circumstance, like I told you at the beginning, how would you feel? Wouldn't you want people to care? Or at least, at the very least, get basic necessities for your family to survive? Remember the Ismailis of Alamut? They went from being refugees to becoming a successful state and being displaced over and over again. But they looked for their leadership and community for help to help them survive and flourish. So now, how can we help Syrian refugees to build resilience, grow strong, and maintain hope? Well, I decided to create change, and not only did I personally want to donate, I needed help from my community to create a substantial impact. And I know this is a very small impact that I'm trying to achieve, but quite frankly, the small differences that we make makes a big difference. This is a small way of how I shifted from caring from my own personal life to the world around me. I want to share whatever I have with the people I love, like Yara, because they deserve better. And so I challenge everyone here today to make it your personal responsibility to create meaningful impact and change around the world. Because if youth aren't going to do it, then no one will.